Welcome to the Sunday SoulFull Sessions Live. So, we're talking about truth today, and we're just going to let you in on the giggle that's been happening for the last 15 minutes in our home. So, trying to get set up with two people on Substack in two different rooms in the same house so that we can both hear and both be, audible and available and with the right backdrops. What a joke. So it's funny is that it's actually very apropos that we're kicking off the truth sessions today with that, because isn't that often true in life? So welcome to the Sunday Soulful Sessions Live. I'm Jennifer Maki. I've had the privilege for the last number of years of working in inner leadership with incredible people in business as entrepreneurs, creators, and I'm the author of Just One Soulful Thing. We've been hosting these Soulful Sessions live for about the last 6 weeks, and we're building up some fun traction with a great community, and we're shifting things up for 2026. And one of the first things we're doing is we're inviting in guests and my co-host, Todd Maki. You may know a little bit about him if you know anything and follow anything to do with me, because he is my husband. I'm incredibly proud to be his business partner, his wife, and co-parent in the craziness of life. And so I'll pass it over to you, Todd, to just introduce yourself and talk about why you're here today and what's thrilling about that.
Thank you, Jen. The launch here reminds me of a story that I used to work for Disney years ago, and I worked on a project called the Winnie the Pooh Festival. So it was in Winnipeg. The first year they ran it, U2 played the week before in Winnipeg, and the Winnie the Pooh Festival actually outdrew U2. So it was this huge event in Assiniboine Park, and I was working backstage, and I was working with the choreographer, and he had a bunch of young adults and kids and stuff, and they were doing this amazing choreography on stage, and they came off stage and they're banging into each other and running and falling over, and I was standing. I'm name dropping not because anyway, it's part of the story. I was standing beside the premier of Manitoba, Gary Dewar, and we're watching this stuff. We're all kind of like giggling and stuff. And he turned to me and said, "This looks exactly like my caucus." So this isn't really the first setup is always some joking around. So anyway, so
Yeah,
we're here. Nice
we're
meeting
here.
everybody.
We made it. We made it. And welcome everybody. It's thrilling. Yeah, it's so true. Todd, you and I talk about this a lot when you and I worked together through years about on stage, off stage, right?
Yes.
And so we were frantic and running around and up and down the stairs and trying to figure out how, and Todd's actually his backdrop's a little askew because the computer wasn't working, and there's rules with Substack about computer versus phone. And so we're running up and down the stairs. And then normally, and myself working in PR, then you get on the camera and you pretend like everything is fabulous. And so you begin, and no one really sees behind the scenes. So today we're talking about truth, and we're talking about not only what happens on stage, but what happens off stage, not just within ourselves, but also in the world. And so for those of you that saw the poster that we posted, we had a little bit of fun in comic book development of Todd and I, because our company, our overarching company, is called Mad Hero Productions. And those of you that again know me through the years, Todd and I and our kids, we homeschooled, and we did something called the Mad Hero Project. And so Mad Hero Productions is kind of a tipping of the hat to that experience that we had in all those years. And so it is that idea about being a mad hero in the world, about doing things that other people dream of doing, or standing up for what's soulful, cultivating heroism within yourself, cultivating heroism within your family, and then how you live that out in the world. And so when Todd and I thought about doing this together, we thought it was a perfect fit. And then we took a photo the other day. For those of you that saw the post on Facebook, we took a photo and I gave 2 renditions of it. I was like, here's the one that we normally post, and here's what was happening behind the scenes. And so with Todd, he oftentimes, and now I have 3 boys in my world. So oftentimes when we're taking selfies or we're taking photos, there is a lot of goofing behind the scenes. And then normally if you pop online with us, then you'll just see, the polished photo at the end. And so we took that photo and turned it into a comic book strip kind of characters of Todd and I. So we've noticed that with our boys. Maybe you talk about that, Todd, about what it feels like to be that behind the scenes in the midst of me trying to take a photo. Oh,
I'll turn my mic on first. There's another glitch at the beginning. You know what? I think Jen and I have a symbiotic relationship in how we deal with the boys. So that there's like Jen is very verbal and very specific and speaks with clarity to them. And sometimes I'm just at the background, just sort of helping out. But I just think it's a fun process to sort of work together in that capacity.
Yeah. And so what we've noticed too is that Todd will kind of goof around behind the scenes because he's a little less overt, a little less sharing than I am. He's comfortable with that. And we have that flow because we kind of have a bit of a public life. But Todd's kind of more behind the scenes. And then the boys now, what we've noticed is we will go to set up for those photos because we've kind of always been in that, we've hoped to be in that inspiring light where we're helping people to kind of align. We're living authentic lives behind the scenes, and we're trying to share what we're learning and gleaning and how we're growing to be able to inspire other people. And for years, it was to help parents and it was to help, people in the world that were working. Todd's been in that capacity for a long time too. But what's happening behind the scenes, behind that frame or outside the frame is so much more important. That's what's being captured. And we're going to talk a lot about that today in the shift and change in society. And so what I noticed with the boys, just the last bit on that photograph element, is that through the years, the boys have always had this because they've always been on camera. They will have this like 1, 2, 3, cheese, and they'll smile. But there are some crazy antics that are happening behind the scenes to get to that point where everybody is in unison with a smile or with a wave or whatever. So now I've started photographing all the photos of the antics, and I love those best. And isn't that an amazing metaphor for our lives, that what's happening outside the frame is even more spectacular than anything we could ever present into the world? And so I just see, hi, why is the frame sideways? Oh, so Luna is pointing out another technical glitch. So apparently I thought it was supposed to work this way, but you know what? Luna just said, thank you for the feedback. Todd, we're going to turn our cameras because it's not working the way Substack said it would. They said if you pop online, whoops, sorry for the technical deal here. They said if you pop online when you've got it on landscape, that it will continue to be in landscape. But Todd, you're going to have to shift your camera. So Luna, thank God you're my tech girl in the back. So how's that? People give us some hearts. How's that going? Can everyone still see us? Okay, wait. I only see half of your face, Todd. So you got to come up really. Okay, great. So, so oh my goodness, isn't that hilarious? Thank you so much for pointing that out, Luna. We would have recorded this entire session with that happening. So it was funny because it said if you turn it sideways and you turn it on, you're good. You can do landscape, because I was thinking that I've seen people do that. And it maybe looks a little bit more widescreen. Anyway, all right, back to it. Thanks, Luna. Really appreciate it. And perfecto. I love that. Okay, so we're talking about truth today. For those of you that are just joining us, I thought it was intentional to be zany. Oh, Luna, we're going to have some fun together. And Luna's going to be one of our guests this year. We've talked about it, and she's going to be one of our guests on the SoulFull Sessions this year. So that's really cool that you could join us, Luna. That's awesome. Oh, and I see the little hearts. I love that. That's great. Awesome. So we're talking about truth today. Welcome to the SoulFull Sessions Live. We're going to kind of start again a little bit because we had some technical difficulties, as we were talking about, for those of you that are catching the recording. And so we're talking about truth, not only truth within the world, but also within ourselves, and being on camera, off camera, what that looks like in the messy and the beautiful of life. So we're going to talk about a little bit about why Todd and I are doing this together. So for those of you that are just joining us, Todd is my husband. We've been together 24 years. We've had tons of fun together. We have always really worked together in some capacity or another. Hey, Todd.
Yes.
And we're co-parents and all that good stuff. And so we really thought that we would take these conversations that Todd and I have all the time. And you can imagine, in homeschooling our boys, we called it life school. And in our world, these conversations were the crux of education. So having conversations about what truly matters to us, how that plays out not only within ourselves as a family, but also in the world. And so truth is a big one right now. It's difficult to discern sometimes, and it's tough to navigate. And so there's been a shift in the last number of years in our world about what truth is and how we flow with that. And I love those hearts. Thank you so much. So welcome. I see Ruby's joined us. Thank you for joining us today. We know your hottest commodity is time, and so we're really grateful you're spending Sunday a little bit of your time with us. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about Todd, talking about when you and I met. So there were turning points in our life, and there was a turning point when you and I met. And we've talked lots about this, but maybe you can share about the turning point with regard to truth that you were in when we met 24 years ago.
Sure. Just let me know my audio is okay because I had to
It's
switch the
perfect.
microphone also.
You're
Um,
great.
okay.
Awesome.
I worked for a company that I won't name. It was a sort of mid-sized company. I was the vice president of operations for this organization, and it came to the Christmas party, and the owner of the company came to me during the Christmas party and said, do a little speech and tell everybody they're getting a bonus next week, and it'll all come through. And so everybody was happy at the party, and we had a beautiful time. And then the Monday when I got back to the office, he said, we're not going to give the bonuses. So he kind of set me up, and I still ponder why that happened, but not a relevant fact here. It broke the trust in that organization, and eventually I got to the point where about 3 months later, I resigned from the company without a job to go to. I said that's enough, and so I took some time for myself. I was 40 at the time, and I was living if you don't know Toronto, but Toronto probably you probably don't know Toronto. It's quite a big city, but there's a cool village called Bloor West Village I lived in, and I took some time off, and then I decided I'm going to go to Ireland, so I went by myself, and I basically booked a hotel at the beginning, booked a hotel at the end, and rented a car and just drove through Ireland for a few weeks. And it was a great experience. I needed to do it. I needed to reset everything. And I came back to Toronto, and I got a phone call from a friend of mine, dear old friend. I used to work with her at Disney days, and she said, You have to come play beach volleyball." So in Toronto, the other thing you don't know, Toronto is the second largest beach volleyball league in North America. There's a huge area called the Beaches, which you probably isn't known for, but there was literally, I think there's 100 courts,
93,
yeah,
93 courts.
tons. So it's a huge league. So anyway, she called me, said, putting this team together. Um, I'm, uh, I want you to come play with the team. I didn't know anybody in the team. And I remember sitting there, and I just got back from Ireland. I said, I don't know if I really want to go and, hang out with a bunch of people I don't know. It's like, so anyway, I went and I showed up, and, I showed up, and there was this beautiful woman looking at the scoreboard, trying to figure out what court we were going to be on. Then I realized she was looking for the same team as I was on. And that's when I met Jenny. And I won't go any, it's a long story, but I won't go any farther. But
This
that
isn't about our origin story, is it, friends?
origin
So,
story,
but yeah,
superhero origin story, yes.
yeah.
There was no radioactive things involved with it, but the origin story nonetheless.
Hero
Um,
nonetheless. Yeah.
yes. And so that kind of precipitated, but the truth speaking that I did then in terms of quitting and taking time off for myself, was a pivotal change, and I could have gone on doing what I was doing, and that's something that I think all of us run into in their lives. You get stuck in a rut, and you just keep going because it's
Yeah.
comfortable.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah. So, and it's interesting because we met and it was the same thing for me. I traveled. I had been away for about 8 years living around the world. And thank you for those little hearts. I love that. So I had been living in a number of different countries, but I've been traveling for about 8 years. So I had just moved back from Austria, and it was a pivotal time for truth grasping for me as well. So when I moved back from Austria, I said, I'm going to have work-life balance. I'm going to have work-life balance. I want to contribute to something that's really meaningful. So I started working for Easter Seals of Ontario, working with children with disabilities and their families. And I really didn't have relationship on the mind. I actually had left a relationship and I had had a phone call. We're still really good friends. He's a lovely guy in Austria, but I just was really kind of done. And I was done with the drama. I was done with, just the games that sometimes can be played within yourself and out in the world. And I remember, one of those defining moments of my life was I was sitting on the phone, and Todd knows this story well. I was sitting on the phone and there was a lot of drama happening with this call from this friend in Austria. And I got off the phone and I just thought, what if my life had no drama at all? And it sounds like such a simple question to ask, but it's been the topic of many workshops I've done through the years because a lot of us have this, unbeknownst to us in many ways, addiction to drama. And how we cut that drama is really understanding our own truth of what we really want. And then it's about choosing that and taking action in that area. So I started this job, and that same friend that invited Todd, we had hired to run events at Easter Seals, and she had worked at Disney, and so she was running our events. And she said to me, if you're going to live in the beaches in Toronto, because that's where I lived, she said, you have to play beach volleyball. And I too was like, well, I'm not sure that, that's a lot with starting a new job and living in a new community, but I thought I promised myself I would have work-life balance. And part of that is getting out and being active because I was an athlete in many ways. And so I arrived and met this guy, Todd Maki, and we started talking. And in our relationship, hey, love, it's been right from the outset. Both of us had been through enough of life. He was 41, you were 41, I was 31. We'd been through enough of life that truth was what mattered most. And one of the things that blew my mind about Todd Maki, and you know this well, Lovey, is that he did quit a job. He wasn't attached to his job as an identification of self. And then he'd been on this grand adventure to Ireland and had really just kind of been this gypsy and took off and had this spontaneous, what I now call and talk about lots, the surrender adventure. And so when you and I met, it was like we just shared truth from the very beginning. And we were talking about this in discussing the topic for this week. But there was this moment where, you and I got together, and you remember it well, Todd, where we were in my apartment and I was sitting by the window and you were on the couch. And we were just friends at the time, just getting to know one another. But both of us poured out what we didn't want in relationship, what we wanted, what we didn't want in life, what we wanted. And we just had this really beautiful, soulful conversation. And so we really, poured it all out. And that actually was the catalyst because we were only real. We could only speak truth. It was the catalyst. And 6 months later, we were engaged. Hey, Lovey? So truth was really the launch. Like it was the launching point. Hey, love, anything else to add on that? Yeah.
No, that's a good summation of the process. Yes.
Oh, good. Luna says, I can relate to your origin story. I can relate. I can relate. Love your origin story. Yeah, I think really when we come from that place where, and you've said this lots too, Todd, about you'd really gotten to a point where you just said, I'm okay alone. Right?
Yep. It's all about taking care of yourself first and then finding what you need later.
Yeah, and understanding who you are and what's important to you. And so that internal truth, learning to listen to that, learning to trust that that was the launching point for us. But I think when I hear of the relationships that really last over time, and how that truth evolves and how your sharing of truth evolves and how you accommodate and deal with one another and support one another through the changes of years and years of decades of life. Those people that started from that place of not that honeymoon period, remember in high school when we had those relationships and there was like a honeymoon period of a month or two, right? Where, the person would be all perfect and they seemed amazing. And then 2 months in, you'd be like, oh, this is not what I entered into. Right. So I think you and I had gotten to that point. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, is that it's actually that's really what's happening in our world. So if we take a look back and we kind of take a look at what, pull the lens out to look at truth in the world. So the history of truth in the world, and Todd, you and I are going to talk a little bit about us growing up, and those of us that are kind of, you were born in the 60s, 70s, or 80s, maybe this is the household you were born in. But truth wasn't really shared. This is before the internet. So you got what you got at the Dewey Decimal System in the library about research. You had to look things up. You had to watch the news if you want to know what was going on in the world. And in your family home, things were not really shared. There was probably more sharing, and my parents really shared a lot as far as talking about life issues and what was happening in the world, because they traveled lots. They lived in Africa. They traveled together as a couple. They talked about world issues. My mother's family was all involved in politics. So we talked things like that. But family business was family business. And so when things went down in the home, you didn't share. If something happened to you, you didn't share. You went to a confessional if that was your religion. And our parents kept things close to the chest. They didn't talk about finances. They didn't talk about problems. There was not that open discussion. There were such thing as private matters that weren't shared. So maybe talk about what it was like, because you're born in 1961, I'm 1971.
Yeah.
So just talk a little bit about what that was like maybe in your world, Todd.
Well, even if you step back, you think of the cohort. I'm a baby boomer, and Jen's Gen X. If you talk about the generation before me, and both of our parents were from the previous generation, it was called the silent generation, and it was an outshoot of people that had lived through the Second World War, and they had been through
Depression.
trauma, and they'd been through instability, and they were not people that shared. It just wasn't something you do. There was no podcast back in the 1940s, right?
No.
And I was thinking of the story. I was talking to my grandmother, who was she was orphaned when she was about 14, I think, and she ended up working in all kinds of places. Anyway, we were talking. There's a place in Thunder Bay. There's a school called the C.D. Howe School. It's a public school because C.D. Howe he was called the everything minister, and he was like the second most prominent minister in the cabinet during the war, and he was and there's the C.D. Howe Institute now, so he had some gravitas. And my grandmother was talking, and she said, and she never said very much about anything, and she said, "Why, do you know C.D. Howe?" I said, "Yeah, there's school up around the corner." I said, "Yeah, I used to be his housekeeper," and I was blown away. And I asked my dad, he didn't know. It was his mom. She never told him that. So there was people were very close to the chest in terms of what they grew up with. And then I think with the baby boomers, the story is that baby boomers came after the silent generation, and they were, for the first time in history, in a long, long time, where there was tremendous prosperity in the world, particularly in Canada, United States, and we were given the opportunity to not have to just sustain ourselves. You could build wealth, you could buy a house, you could grow, your kids would have more money than you did, and they would be better than you. And so it was a very positive time.
Yeah.
And I think that set up the change from the silent generation to a more open generation. And we saw that in the late 50s with the beatniks, and then later with the hippies in the 60s, and then 70s kind of went off the rails a little bit. But
it took a while to get there, isn't it? How it really was like there was this desire they wanted it. When you look at the 60s, people started to voice their opinions, started to speak out, burn their bras. There was this desire, but it took a while, and it actually maybe took until the internet to be able to shift that around, because it really didn't take hold. So, and for me, growing up, my parents were like that. Things were very close to the chest. My mom had mental health issues, and so that was very private. There was nowhere for her to go to get help. You can imagine that's a whole other podcast in and of itself, but there really was. My father didn't have support. He loved my mother deeply, and my mom struggled, and there was nowhere for him to go. People didn't talk about that at all In fact, there was the line, that's family business. And there was a warning with that, like, you do not share. We don't want people to know our business. When I grew up in my small town of Orillia, Ontario, and I'm sure those of you, if you're growing up in kind of that generation, there were people that were gay that I had no idea, none. Until we got to university, there was no way that they wanted to share that that was their truth and who they were until they moved into larger circles. There were also lots of people with the whole Me Too movement of what's happened since then. There were lots of girls that I talked to that had been in those situations where they said absolutely nothing. And so there has been, it really took the internet. Would you agree with that, Todd, that it kind of took that shifting in the internet where we kind of became more globally connected? What do you think about
Yeah,
that?
it certainly accelerated it. I think,
Yeah.
the communication became prominent. But even back in the 70s, you look at the protests for the Vietnam War
Yeah.
in the United States, and there was, the Detroit burning, and, Black Day in July,
Yeah.
the Gordon Lightfoot song. Um,
Yeah.
it's a growing process, I think, and accelerate. It's coming through now. I think we're seeing it in the States, and we're seeing it in protests in Iran right now, and we're seeing it in, Europeans are even protesting the Greenland thing. So
Yeah.
people are not as shy about going out and saying, no,
Yeah.
this isn't wrong. And if you ask either of our sons, they'll give you their opinion very clearly. I mean,
And I think that's the shift, right? It's really gone from there was that silent generation, and then then the pendulum swings. So we're going to talk about that next. So this pendulum swing now, and in good ways and challenging, as with anything, as shifts come about, there are the good elements of that shift. So the Me Too movement that brought to light, and there were pivotal defining moments or situations that were brought to light, that were brought into the media light, shared on the internet. And I think, Me Too is one of those where people felt that they could come forward. And then there's the whole shifting of not only do people not have to hide anymore when they are gay or they're trans or and they're exploring their identity or figuring out who they are and then claiming that now they can claim it. And our sons growing up, I love that they with us it was a transition with pronouns, it was a transition with identity, it was a transition we always accepted. I grew up in a home, maybe unusually so, but my parents had lived all over the world, and so for them, they had lived in Africa before apartheid, and they just loved, it was love is love and people are people. That's the family I grew up in. That wasn't typical necessarily of a lot of families. But now we've taken it one step further in our children, like even when we played the game of life, hey, Todd, with the boys. So when you would, I don't know if those of you that have played the game of life, but you get the car and then you're the couple. And then, so you get the couple and it's the little stick, like the little plastic stick that you'd be able to get to put your little character in. And we would say to the boys, do you want a boy or a girl? When they were little. And they would look at us and go, oh my gosh, of course I want a girl. I mean, like, no, no, no. So right from the outset, we raised our children to be able to know, or hopefully to know, that whatever they chose in life was beautiful and speaking your truth was paramount. And so we'll come back to family in a moment. But I think that, it's this pendulum swinging. So there was silence, and then people started, there was a growing momentum, right, of people speaking their truth. And then it kind of culminated, and now people can claim their truth. But there's another shift happening now that Luna just alluded to. And
I
yeah,
was going to speak to
you,
that one too, and thank
yeah,
you for bringing it up, Lynn. It is a typical
absolutely.
time in the U.S. I think that um, it it's even a testament to the people that are protesting now, that because it is dangerous, it's even
Yeah,
more an important statement that,
absolutely.
I'm putting myself at personal risk to do this, as the people in Iran are, and other parts of the world, to protest. But we're still able to tell our truth. They're still able to stand up and say, we this is not right.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then there's the one step further. Right? So there's the one step further that there's the good of all that truth speaking. People feel, so we were saying with our boys, and I want to go back to that for a minute because they grew up with this idea of pronouns. We were in affirming church. When we lived in Calgary, the gal that ran the youth program, she and her wife ran the youth program. Our kids were raised in that environment to be accepting and inclusive. That was really important to us. We wanted to live in multicultural communities so our children would understand that just the vast diversity and beauty of human beings. And so now they're very clear. In fact, our one son in an experience that he had, and I won't go into the details, but there was an individual that he was in relationship with, and he was a roommate of his, and he was making comments. Just he's from a different country, he doesn't really understand and relate to the whole movement that we've been through in particularly Canada and the United States, but particularly in Canada and for our boys. And he's at a school that's way up on an island. So he was in this environment where someone had said, I don't really understand transgender. I don't understand that. I don't agree with that. And so our son was just so clear, very loving, spoke his truth from a place of center with respect that we're going to talk about in a bit. But he was very clear. And both of our boys have been very clear with Todd and I about, well, that's not a he, that's a they. And this is why they call themselves that. Or this person has, they're transgender. And so they used to be a boy, now identifies as a girl. So please honor that. This generation is now embracing this idea of identity and being able to figure that out. And even though they may not be moving through that, they are very clear about honoring another person's truth. And the conversation, hey, Todd, that we've had with our boys around that, about, it's not right, this idea of right or wrong or true or isn't true. The human being's truth matters in that equation.
Yeah,
right?
with that individual, it was really, we had a long discussion with him one afternoon. Just we're playing games with him and our son.
Board games and hanging out.
Yeah.
And,
we talked about the truth as being, it is sometimes a little bit subjective, because if you've only lived in a village where it's, let's, for example, say it's strictly Christian Orthodox, and you live with people that are in that community and you're not really exposed to anybody else, when people ask you about anything, you're living the world through a filter of what you've been told through that structure, right? So it is the truth in your mind because it's all you know, but it doesn't mean you've fully investigated all the aspects of what the truth could possibly be. So when people say this is truth or you're wrong, or this is a fact, well, facts are, and I hate to, it's like a political thing almost, but the facts become subjective unless they're looked at through a critical eye. So it's difficult to assert what the truth is sometimes. So when people speak their truth, sometimes it's not fully formed. That's all. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the relationship has a lot to do with it. So when this whole experience happened, we said to our son, you have one of two choices. You can shut off that person and shut them out, or if there's an opening and a relationship is built for that person to meet people that are of transgender, that have a different opinion, and you get to know the human behind that experience, then all of a sudden the relationship that you have to the knowledge is really essential. And so I remember when I was running a camp before I started running the corporate head office for Easter Seals in Ontario. I remember I was at a conference for running the camp for Easter Seals. And so they brought different groups together, like Palestinians and Israelis together. And they had a camp that they ran where they would have the children would go to camp. And this is way back. This is not in the political climate of now, but way back, probably that would have been before I met you. So 25 years ago. So they brought these children together in a camp to get to know one another. And that was all about bringing about an empathy and an understanding of what was happening on the other side. And what was interesting was, because he was this was a leader in this development of this camp. And it was the Ontario Camping Association, and he was a professional speaker, but he had built this camp and worked with these people. And he said, what you learned in the beginning was, as the children were speaking around the campfire and having these conversations, you could just hear their parents being parroted. Like that's all they knew was what their parents knew. And after 2 weeks, now there was obviously a crack of opening the fact that they would have even been allowed to go to this camp. But in going to that camp, 2 weeks later, the children had their own opinions. So that idea of building relationship in order to be able to understand another side is so powerful. And I think, in Nathaniel's, in his choice of you can either walk away or you can educate, you can either walk away or you can expose and have conversations, even though they're uncomfortable, is so important. And there's been an openness, on this young man's side to just hear whether that changes opinion or not is completely an aside, really. But the fact that we continue to have that dialogue when there is that ability to listen is just so powerful. Thoughts on that, Todd?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's the exposure to the world. I grew up in Thunder Bay, and Thunder Bay is when I grew up, I was Finnish. I'm Finnish descent, blonde hair, blue eyes, and there's the population there is predominantly Finnish, Dutch, and so very waspy looking people. I used to joke that Italians were the visible minority then. So I wasn't really exposed to a lot of different cultures and a lot of different ideas. And when I moved to Toronto, it was jarring and awakening. But once I got involved in that, I was in the entertainment industry. And so my perspective of what it was to be gay was way different than it was when I was 15, when there weren't there weren't any in Thunder Bay, because nobody, you would have been, it was a very tough, it's a tough place to grow up, a lot of hockey players, and it's an industrial town. And so if you were that, and we knew there were people that were gay, and we just didn't talk about it, and but they would never come out. Nobody came out in Thunder Bay. That would be
No.
like you'd have a really serious time. And then moved to Toronto, and all of a sudden, wow, this entertainment industry, and this is all this stuff's going on, and it was the exposure that certainly changed me. I think everybody should move away from their hometown, at least for a little while, just to see what it's like.
And really, and all this ties in kind of to our next section, talking about mental health with truth speaking, right? So, this idea that for our mental health, there has to be that sharing, there has to be that understanding of our truth and an ability to express rather than suppress. And so I really do feel, and I actually noticed Sue Ann Howes is on here. She's from Thunder Bay, actually. So hi, Sue Ann. It's great to have you here. Hi, everybody. Those of us that joined in the last little bit, we're talking truth, as you can obviously tell. So this idea of truth in relationship to mental health. So the ability to know it, to be encouraged to go within, to even consider your own truth, and then to be able to share that in the world, and how now people are sharing. So this is beautiful because I think there's a healing in that. And I definitely know, as you said, Todd, I was mind blown, and I was disheartened to learn after I left high school, after a few years traveling, to look back and learn about the people that I'd gone to school with that were gay, and that they had never been able to share their truth the entire time I knew them growing up. Like, it was horrifying to me. It was horrifying. And another girlfriend of mine, I was the MC at her wedding. She and her husband divorced, and she married a woman and moved to Spain. And I called her and I said, I don't know how I missed it. Like, is this something that I missed? Did you not feel you could share with me and talk to me? And so I think it's very heartening now that we can share our truths, that we can speak it, and we encourage more and more. We're raising the next generation of people to share. But now there's a pendulum swing, right? To the overshare, to the intensity online. So not necessarily in having to deal with these things, but now I don't know if any of you have been on comments of late, but if we're ever on the internet, so there's this pendulum swing now where we've gone, where people are sharing, but because of anonymity and a lack of relationship, now there's a sharing that's quite frightening. And so let's talk a little bit about that, Todd. You got some thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a little scary. I mean, I think they talk about the amount of people with mental health issues, and percentages are variable, but we've heard that the numbers Jen mentioned it last week, between 1% and 4.5% of people are psychopaths in the world. So guess how many people, as a percentage wise, are on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it now? And that's just talk about Twitter as the example. I think they chased a lot of open discourse that I thought was promising, and then they started another one. The name eludes me right now, and it started off really great, and then those people seeped in. So the sort of online bullying it ruins it for people to actually have conversations. And I think that politics in every country, including Canada, taints this sort of discussion about what the real problems are. So one of the things I found when I was in Europe that I thought was really quite cool was when I was in Ireland, I was talking to Irish people, and they talked about social issues. They didn't talk about politics. They talked about, issues with the church. They talked about issues with not the homeless, but the travelers that are there, and how you have to be careful. But they're just people. But it was so the travelers are what they call the gypsies. They can be a problem in terms of crime, but it wasn't that they were bad people. It was just, how do we help these people?
Free
So
spirited.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's I don't know, but I think it's more of a European thing. But we talk about society, and I think that's if you go back in the 70s when Pierre Trudeau was prime minister, Justin's father, he talked about, and I always stuck with me, creating a just society. So a place where people can live in, and it's a safe place to live, and it's not about. He was famous for saying that the government does not belong in the bedrooms of the people of Canada, and I think that's a really good way to look at it. But I think that we've veered so much away from that for so many reasons, and with all this truth telling of people that are ill-informed, let's say.
Yeah.
And
And
opinion anyway. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that the lack of relationship, like this anonymity thing, is quite wild. And yeah, we were talking about last week the idea of going into community, going into the pub, going into the coffee shop, meeting people so that you can build relationship. Just like you're talking about in Ireland, that's so important to not lose that. And we need to recognize that you or I would not be making comments on the internet very often. And I think we all need to keep that in mind when we're looking at comments on the internet. There's a certain population that feels the need to not just share their truth, but spew their truth, like out of anger, out of fury, out of frustration. I just find it amazing, even in our small community, when I look at Facebook groups, the fact that someone will come on and ask for something, and they've got 15 to 20, 50 people commenting with their advice on how to deal with something. So this pendulum has swung, the wild direction. So I think a couple things are really important, because you and I, and the reason for doing the Soulful Way, the SoulFull Sessions live, there are a lot of podcasts and commentary shows out there. I think for me personally, and I think for Todd and I in our discussions, it's about bringing a soulful perspective to that. How do we bring this back to a place of heart and intention? And how do we just take a breath from the world that's being presented to us, take a step back, look inward, and tend our own garden? And so, with regard to truth, it's that we can become overwhelming when we go online. So we have to be vigilant about what we allow into our minds and into our hearts, because this whole idea of doom scrolling is just so insane to me, that if you were at a party, we were saying last week, if you were at a party, you'd walk out. You would not hang out with people that were speaking that way. But when we're online, we're behind the scenes, but that's still filtering into our minds. So we have to be vigilant about what we allow into our minds, what truth we're allowing into our realm, and how we're being able to navigate that, right? And so, this idea of truth speaking. So when we take a look at truth speaking, so we pull that lens back and we think about it from how we develop personally and a truth within ourselves, understand our own truth, and then speak it. And then how do we be able to deliver that in the workplace? So that was a lot of my work in the world. So looking at a microcosm as opposed to that macrocosm of trying to, solve all the issues of the world and what's happening on the internet. But when we take it into personal relationship, when we take it into the workplace, take it into our lives. So maybe talk a little bit about, Todd, you've worked in education, you've worked at Disney, you've worked at many companies in operations, communications. Maybe talk a little bit about truth in the workplace, why that's important, how you build a culture around that in the workplace, and then why that's important and what your experience has been with regard to that. Because I know you've got a lot of really interesting stories in that area.
Yeah, I think the one point there's you could go I could
Yeah.
talk hours on this and
Yeah.
with everybody, but I think that one of the things that I was encouraged when I was in leadership roles was to you have to sort of work with people to get it out because they don't want to they don't want to do it. So I just thought about the story. There was a guy I worked with. I got hired as a CEO of this startup company, and he had applied for the job and he didn't get it. He was a younger guy. I was in my late 30s, and he was in his late 20s, kind of thing. And so he didn't have the experience yet, but he was really driven. He's an Eastern European guy, really he's intimidating presence and really really great guy. But so I came in and I got the job that he wanted, and so he kind of went into the first meeting. And he sat back with his hands like this and just kind of listened. And I just started prodding with him, like not in an antagonistic way, but just about what he wanted to do and how he saw the company, where he wanted to go. And I said, "Where do you want to be? Like, do you want my job?" And so it's a little bit challenging when you someone asked the question, which is exactly what he was thinking. And he said, "Well," I said, "if you want my job, here's the plan. I will train you to do my job, and then I'll move on." Because that's the way it works, right? You need people for people to be successful. They have to know that they're welcome and they're open to discussions. And from that point on, I would bring them in and say, "Hey, I'm doing a strategy thing. I'm thinking of doing this. What are your thoughts on it?" And whether the thoughts were valid or not, we could talk through things. And I've used this model in probably
Yeah.
or other companies. It doesn't work in every company because of the culture. But when I'm actually able to control the way it's going to go, this is a good plan to work. And by like 3 months in, he was like my biggest supporter in the company. And my job was to help him be successful. And that's what real leaders, I think, do, is to help people be successful. But I was able to push him in a gentle way by asking him what he wanted, so that he could actually share his truth with me and then with other people in the company. And so I think that's a good basic model to start off with in business.
Yeah, really good point. Like sometimes people don't know their truth. Like it's coming along, it comes out in emotional ways, which is, a lot of the workshops I was doing, for those that don't know the work that I do, I've been doing professional speaking and workshops and retreats for corporations, nonprofits, healthcare companies, educators for a number of years. And this, like, still the truth conversation, the speaking your truth from a place of center with respect, that's still one of the number one talks, workshops, retreat elements that need to be weaved in, because we deal with this every single day. And so we first have to know our truth. So understanding what that truth is, that's the introspective element of things. So as you say, Todd, encouraging people to consider their truth, whether that's in relationship, whether that's with in relationship with your partner, relationship with your friends, relationship with your children, and in the workplace, is that, if you're confident enough to know your truth and you're introspective enough to encourage and ask the questions that allow people to be able to share theirs, to draw it out of them. When we see that emotional response, the rolling of the eyes, the crossing of the arms, that block, there's a defensiveness that's happening there. So learning to read those signs,
Yeah.
and then being able to speak your truth in a way that will be received. And so maybe talk a little bit about your experience, because I know there's a few stories where leaders within your company, your bosses, spoke their truth in a way that did not allow for it to be well received. I'm thinking of one in particular, that led to the pivotal point of you choosing truth and quitting a company.
Um, there's so many. Which one specifically were you thinking about?
I'm thinking the company that you were with right before you quit. Like that, it will lead to a point where there's such high stress, right? Because you can't share your truth.
Um, I'm not. I am honestly. I don't remember which specific you're talking about with that one, but
I just the anger of the owners of the company that you were with before you quit. So the rug company. And they were just so angry all the time. So
oh,
maybe I'm putting you on the spot.
that was yeah, that was.
Just the anger, right? Just that, so in general, this idea, and I don't mean to put you on the
Oh,
spot,
okay. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, okay. The one guy. So there
it
were.
leads to your
It was
health issues.
it was a
Right.
family company, and there was mental health issues here too. It was a family company, and the father had brought the company over, and brought it to Canada. And this was the second generation, and there were three brothers that were running the company. And so I got hired by one brother, and I took the job. And then the day I took the job, he resigned from the company. So I got hired by somebody that quit the company. And then there's two other brothers, but the younger one sort of took the dominant role, and he was sort of the least qualified to actually manage people. But he would come into my office every Friday afternoon and tell me who I had to fire. He would say, "Okay, this person they screwed up an invoice, you have to go fire her," or this person they messed up an order, they had to go fire her. So I spent Friday afternoons. Typically, this was the style. So about 1 o'clock, you come in, you want to fire somebody, we have a big blow up about them, and I have to defend them and tell them why they're not going to go. And then by 4 o'clock, we were. This is kind of funny. They were a company. The owners were Muslim, and the father was very devout. The sons weren't. So they made me go out and expense a bottle of scotch and put it in my desk for Friday afternoons. So by about 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon, we're sitting in my office drinking the expensive single malt scotch. But it was it's a frustrating process because he was just taking his frustration on everybody and inadvertently on me. And to the point where one time I was sitting by my desk and my assistant was sitting beside me and we were working on some spreadsheet stuff. And my I just everything went dizzy on it, and I sort of spun. And I almost hit my head on my desk, and I just completely lost everything. And uh, all kinds of tests, and she thought I was having a stroke, and I wanted to call an ambulance, but it was just stress. I got it checked out, and it was just that it was too much being asked of me in terms of basically trying to grow the company. We in a uh, in a 9 month period, we closed two warehouses in Toronto, opened a brand new distribution center in central Quebec, which meant a lot of travel for me. We rebranded the company, we changed the financial system,
Wow.
and we just redid the operation top to bottom.
Yeah.
And that was done in a 9 month period, and that was the projects that I was responsible for. So a fair amount of stress, and then the boss coming in and just basically, going nuts every Friday afternoon. Um,
Yeah.
you just it was a time of spending time just defending everybody in the company. So it just became too much at that point.
And it doesn't mean that, and it's interesting because those things happen. There's ambitions. Welcome to those that are joining us. I see the bathroom. See Robes joining us and Jade. Welcome. Good to see you guys. Thanks for joining us on this, essential conversation on truth. And we were just saying a little earlier, the reason why we're doing these soulful sessions is to talk about some of these issues that we're all issues and opportunities that we are constantly dealing with in our life, but from a soulful and intention perspective. And how do we bring it back? And so we've kind of been dabbling in what the cultural shifts have been, why Todd and I have come together. If you missed the recording, hi, Jade. I see that. Hey, Jen and Todd. Good to see you, love. So, you can go back and watch the recording. But right now we're talking about truth speaking kind of in the workplace and in relationship. And the reason why I wanted you to tell that story, Todd, is that it didn't mean that those shifts didn't need to happen. It didn't mean that those people didn't need to be let go. It didn't mean that, that the advancement of the company wasn't important, but it's not, and cliche as it sounds, it's not what we say, it's how we say it. It's how we deliver that truth. It's how we organize how to present that truth. And working in PR, and one of the hats that I wear is crisis communications. And 99% of the time, that crisis that I end up helping to turn around could have been averted had people communicated from a place of respect and a place of clarity and a place of kindness and compassion and consideration. And it doesn't mean that decisions don't have to be made, but it's how you deliver them, it's how you speak it, it's how you share. And so a couple of examples of that, I was working with Easter Seals a number of years ago, children with disabilities, and I woke up one day And I opened the paper. I was in the beaches in Toronto where Todd and I met, and I opened the Sunday paper, and the front page of the paper. So I'm not speaking out of turn, and I won't share all the intimate details of what happened. It was a number of years ago, over 22 years ago. But I opened up the paper and it said, "Has Easter Seals lost its heart?" And there was a picture of two children in wheelchairs on the front of the paper. And I was the head of communications, and they had just hired me, brought me back from Austria. This is right when I met Todd 24 years ago. They brought me back, and they had not told me that the camp that I had been running a year before was the one they were going to be closing. And they closed it at Christmas with a Merry Christmas letter. And by the way, we're going through some corporate changes, and we'll be closing this camp. And if you can just for a moment imagine what it would feel like to be a parent with a child with a disability, where you are dependent on these places that will provide respite for you, for your family, and an inclusive environment for your children. And you live for that. Those kids live for that camp. And they closed two of the major ones and left three open. And so I spent my year in crisis communication mode, writing speeches for the executive director and all the senior people, talking about why they made that choice. And so I only mention that because the message was a good one. Only 11% of the population was actually accessing these camps, and they were going to build a day camp that supported the 89% that weren't tapping that camp. So it was a beautiful message. The things that your boss was telling you to do, Todd, they were prevalent, they were good messages. It was a good change, or it had to change in order for the company to succeed. But it's how you deliver it, and the timing is everything, and how you consider your audience. And so even, as an individual working in a setting, and I talk about this lots in my workshops, is that if your truth is spoken with emotion, with anger, there will be a fallout that you then now have to deal with that muddies your message. So it doesn't matter how powerful your message is. If you throw a tantrum, if you make it difficult for a man who is very capable to work for you, if you deliver a message to a parent at Christmas that's something that's going to, fundamentally shift the life of their child and the family, it doesn't matter how beautiful your message is, doesn't matter how powerful, important it is, there will be an emotional fallout that you will then have to deal with. And whatever your important message was will get lost in the mess. Have any thoughts about that, Todd, in the workplace, or examples or thoughts around that in your experience and what you've kind of dealt with? Just
Well,
about, the emotions in a workplace,
yeah, sometimes
or dealing with it well.
it builds up. I mean, I've dealt with not to stereotype, but warehouses and running with the people in the warehouse, and sometimes they just get they tune themselves up by something that's not really an issue. We had issues in the two warehouses in Toronto with the staffing, just because it was being run before I got there.
Yeah.
And then when we opened the new warehouse in Quebec, I started off by showing up as the Anglophone going into Quebec from people in the States. That's kind of a political issue there.
Yeah.
So I spoke English, they spoke French. I had broken grade, 10 English. But I would go into the warehouse and I would show up as the VP in jeans and a t-shirt, and I would throw rugs around with them for like a half a day and
Right.
just, associate myself. So it gave them the opportunity to get to know me a little bit. And even if they couldn't communicate with me, they could see that I wasn't just coming in and making stupid decisions, and
Yeah.
I was able to actually carry my weight in the warehouse.
And you're the king of relationships. Like, one of the things I respected about you from you and I way back, just meeting and talking about how you dealt with business, was the relationships that you would develop with people, so that when things went down, you could talk about it, you could deal with it, you could connect with it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the key to all of that. And,
Yeah.
that's a business decision. So.
Yeah. And even like way back when I ran a nightclub in the Cayman Islands and restaurants, and Todd and I, would talk about this because you were firing people every Friday. And My background, really my passion for my whole life has been about communications, how we communicate, which stemmed from growing up in the house that I did, with the family that I did, with the mental health issues that were present, and how I learned that how you say something, how you present, how you connect and communicate is everything to relationship. And now I work with companies and nonprofits, and I really respected you, Todd, from the very outset, that you built these soulful relationships with people. And even when it came to like a letting go, like all these years later, you can reach out to someone that you did business with 30 years ago, and they're like, "Oh, hey, Todd, how's it going?" Like that relationship development, really the base of that is truth. How that person was able to share with you, how you shared with them, how you respected them through their process. So when I was running a nightclub, and I would call it, I wouldn't call it firing, I would call it liberating. So I went, and Todd and I would laugh about this when he took on a new job, and I said, well, actually, what I call it is liberation. It's not firing, it's liberating. And so I would sit down with people as I was letting them go, and I would say, listen, you are not passionate here. Like, if I have to sit with you about, if I want a cattle prod you to get you going, which was it was a joke, but it was like to get you going, to get your energy and enthusiasm to be in this environment, to do your job. If I feel like I've got to push and prod you all the time, this is not the place for you. You are not passionate about this. And I'm not doing you any favors by keeping you in a place that you are not passionate about. I need people to be passionate and excited about what they're doing here in order for us to be able to hit the goals that we have. If you are not passionate, I need to let you go. And I need to set you free, because you're staying with the devil because you're afraid of the devil you don't. And so I would say to people, come back to me in a couple of months or whenever you can land that job and tell me how great you're doing. Because I promise you, what's happening right here is the best thing that ever happened to you. I don't want you to perceive it as something negative. I want you to perceive it as liberation. And so the irony was, people would come back to me and tell me how great they were doing. Like, thank God, because now I'm working at a bookstore, or I'm doing whatever. I'm working at the golf course. I love working outside. So it would completely change. So that idea of how we deliver truth. And so in my workshops, I would talk about the steps that I would take. So there were always difficult conversations that I had to deal with, and I know you feel that too, Todd. You're talking about them here. But even in relationship, when we have something to say, it will eat us alive if we don't share it. In many, many cases, right? It's oftentimes, you'll have an altercation with someone, or you'll have a weird energy, and you'll walk away, and then your brain thinks, oh my God, I wish I'd said that. And you think of all the important things you wish you'd said. Or you're in front of the mirror, and you're having a soliloquy moment where you're talking about all the things you wish you'd done, you wish you'd said. These ruminating conversations in our minds about our truth, it is really important. And we talked about mental health earlier. It is incredibly important to share it. And it does not matter, in all my years of experience and all the conversations, all the coaching clients, it is not about how it's received. It's about how it's delivered, so that you feel proud about you and you've spoken and shared your truth. What do you think about that, Todd?
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. The first guy that I had to terminate, he was an artist, and he was a good artist, but he just wasn't doing very well at the job. And I brought him in my office, and when I said, we're gonna let you go, he said, why? He didn't understand. And I just talked to him. And by the time he left the office, he shook my hand and said, thank you very much. I'm going to really enjoy. I'm going to go now. I'm going to design auto cars, or race cars. He wanted to design. So he was designing rugs, and he didn't really want to do that. And now it gave him the opportunity to go ahead and do something else.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm just saying thank you, Luna, for coming. I see she's got a scoot. That's great. We're going to wrap up here in a little bit. Thank you. You know what? It's so true. It's that. So just to get back a little bit about, so what do we do with all this? So what do we do with all this truth? And so now it's a bit of the practical bit. So when I would talk to my team, because I ran communications teams, and so it was really, and there was always a lot of drama in the workplace, right? There always is. It's a lot of drama, particularly people working in a PR agency, a lot. And I love women that are secure are fabulous. Women that are insecure can be really challenging. And there's no woman that's secure that would not say that's true. That's not true. And so I worked with a lot of women that were just figuring life out. And so when I had the communications team, I would talk to people about how do you speak your truth and how do you deliver that? And then in workshops, the same thing. And people would talk, this is like a major thing in the workplace. I have a truth to share. I don't know how to share it. Or I show up and I become so emotional and I've carried it for so long that I fight for my truth. I feel like I have to fight for it. And this is true a little less for men, because men will tend to say, you're really pissing me off, and you'll say it, and then you'll deal with it and walk away, and the air will be cleared. Women tend to take on more. That's just by nature of who we are. Not all, obviously, but a lot of women will take on more. They'll take it in, take it in, take it in. And in some cases will tell everybody but you when they have a challenge. They won't want to have that honest conversation. And they're tough conversations to have, whether you're male, female, or anywhere, anywhere along that spectrum and how you identify. But the thing is that that truth will eat away at you. And so we have to find ways to be able to get it out and to share it in a way that we feel proud of. So kind of the steps that I would give in a workshop, just as far as, a little practical injection in our day to think about things, that I would talk to them about speaking with the end in mind. Not all conversations are worth having. Not all conversations are valid. If you are totally misaligned with someone, and we see this a lot on the internet, if you do not fundamentally agree on values, there comes a stop point in that conversation. And it just happened to me a week and a half ago. I shared my soul about what happened with Renee Scott, and someone came forward and had their very pointed opinion that was opposite to mine. I put forth my opinion, and then I took it offline. And this person came, into my personal feed and my personal message and was frustrated with me about the fact that I didn't continue. And I said, listen, you and I don't agree. It's a person I've known for a long time. I respect you. For most things, I appreciate your family. You're a lovely person. There's many things that I really value about you, but you and I on this point are absolutely in disagreement. There is no point in having this conversation. And I'm not going to convince you, and you are not going to convince me. So we need to let that go. So this is one of those practical things, thinking about the end in mind. Can we get anywhere? Is this of value, this conversation? I totally believe in discourse. I believe in people having difference of opinion. That's a democracy. It's a beautiful element of our society. But we have to decide for us how much of that is healthy. How much do I share that's healthy? And so that idea of thinking with the end in mind. If you feel like it's a conversation that is worth having, whether that's in the workplace to be able to overcome an issue, whether that's in personal relationship where you think that, usually they're started by miscommunication, something that was misunderstood. And so clearing the air, clarifying, you feel like you could move forward, then my next recommendation, invitation, is to actually go within and think about what your truth is with clarity. Write it out, practice it. And it doesn't matter how old we get, how many years we've lived, this is still a great practice. We need to get quiet for a while. We need to think about what our truth is. We need to write it out, because that takes it from, we know what's tossing and turning in our mind. It puts it down on paper. And sometimes we will look at what we put down on paper and we would rather burn it than say it. So that's really important that we get that out, right? And then we practice it. And then we come from that place of center, and we meditate, and we take deep breaths, and we self-regulate. And then we intentionally step into the conversation with a clarity and a calm that allows our truth to be heard. And it doesn't matter who this is with, whether it's with your children, whether it's with your partner, whether it's with someone in the workplace, whether it's online. We need to be responsible for our own sense of calm and peace and deliverance of that. For the other person, no. I mean, it does help our world. But it's most important for us to remain peaceful and calm and centered in our own truth. So anything you want to add to that, Todd? Anything that you think of that, just flows from that?
Sometimes in receiving that truth too, I want to quote the great Canadian philosopher Keanu Reeves. He said one time, sometimes when people tell you 1 + 1 = 5, you just go, okay, and you let it go, because the truth isn't going to be, it's their truth, it's not your truth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that idea of just allowing it to let go. And I think, in the pendulum swinging of the silent generation to now, I joke about it with our kids because in growing up in that silent generation of not even knowing sometimes, and I had great conversations with my father, but sometimes I didn't even know why I was sent to my room. I didn't it was like, "That's enough, Jennifer, like, away you go, and, if you Jennifer, you were in trouble." And so off I would go. So when we raised our kids, truth has been the foundation of our parenting from the outset, has it not, Todd?
Yes.
Okay. Right from the beginning. And it came a lot. The reason why we even chose to homeschool, what we called life school, was because myself working in leadership, Todd working in leadership, we wanted to raise children that have the foundational understanding of some of these key elements, laws of the universe, key elements of self-interest, of introspection, of self-regulation, of mindfulness training, of mindfulness thinking and speaking, these inner leadership characteristics, and then that flowing to the outer leadership of our own lives, in that case with our kids. And so it was the foundation for what we did. So right from the outset, I used to do this with teams, and then we brought it into our family, is that I always had a team mantra. So when I would come on, when I was working with all the staff, I had 75 staff working for Easter Seals Camp. They came on board, and I said, instead of rules, we're going to talk about values. And so we came up with a mantra for the camp. And so that mantra led everything that we did in the camp because it was values based. It wasn't rules based. So do we care about the children getting to bed earlier so that they have a wonderful day because this is their 1 week at camp? That's great. Then we have a curfew because if we get good sleep, then we can better provide for those young people. And so it was all based on that. So when Todd and I became a family, we came up with the Maki mantra. And the Maki mantra is, we are a family devoted to God, love, joy, and compassion for others. We act in ways that respect one another, its divine essence, and we bring each other home to truth and peace. And so that mantra of ours led everything that we did. So when we would talk to our kids and the reason I'm sharing this, even if you're a parent, your kids are grown, or, you're not a parent at all, it is about raising this next generation and thinking about these things within ourselves, because people do not do what we say, they do what we do. So even if we're influencing other people that are other adults, sometimes some of us are a little bit more attached to the child within, in a good way and in a bad way, out in the world. And so it's this idea of coming back to that idea of, you don't have to fight for your truth. Your truth is just your truth. I talk about that with my clients all the time. We talk about with our kids. Hey, Todd,
Yes.
your truth is just your truth. And so you don't have to fight for it. Particularly in our home, we would say to our kids, you do not need to throw a temper tantrum to be heard. You do not need to get angry. You can share your truth. We won't always agree. We may not be on the same page, but you don't have to shout that. You don't have to be frustrated. We're here to listen, and you can always speak your truth from a place of center with respect. And when you can't, you just go away and center yourself for a time till you come back to a place of calm. You don't have to be happy. Come back to a place of calm so that you can share your truth with us in a way that we can hear you and that you'll feel proud about you in doing so. And now we look at our 19 and 17-year-old, 18. Oh, he'd kill me. He's 18 now, just as a couple of weeks ago. Our 19 and 18-year-old, they speak their truth from a place of center with respect. And it's a beautiful thing. What do you want to share on that, Todd? What it's like to be, kind of a parent and sharing those ideas and thoughts and how we've raised our boys?
It's just such a natural process now. It's not even, you don't even think about it. And they have become, as you have said before, the boys we want women to marry. Just
Yeah.
they're kind, respectful kids.
Yeah. So, this idea in your own life of just taking some of those into account. So, if you're needing to have those conversations that are difficult, first of all, really being clear about what your truth is. And all of us, in the workplace, I know there's some folks working in politics, there's others, working in corporate works, others that are creative writers and they're sharing their truth in written form. We have musician friends that are sharing in their music. So, this idea, wherever it is, to understand what your truth is. And this is the Soulful Way and the Soulful Hub and the SoulFull Sessions are all about, really, if you had to put it into one sentence, is about learning to listen within and honor that voice and trust that innate wisdom that flows within you. You know what's right for your life. You know what's right. It's the morality is self-evident. Your truth is self-evident when you become quiet and calm enough to be able to listen to that and then to be able to share that. And so this idea of truth, coming back to what are these truths? And we're going to do a little closing meditation in a moment just to kind of get you into that space. But thinking with the end in mind, practicing what it is your truth is to speak, thinking about some of the things that will make you feel good about you, that this is a truth that needs to be shared. How can I share it in a way that is, honestly, I would walk into every business meeting when there was truth to be shared, and this never goes away. Doesn't matter how old you are. You will always come across situations, if you have a rich and full life with a diverse range of people, you will come back again and again to be able to consider speaking your truth where it needs to be spoken. And we need people in this world to speak up and share their truth, to protest if that's where you're called, to share your truth where it can be heard, to have that discourse, but to have it not at the expense of your emotion, at the expense of your mental health, to allow that to run away on you so that you don't feel proud about you. We want to always feel like when we look in that mirror, we feel good about who we are and the truth that we're sharing and the position that we're taking in life that is so important because really beautiful, soulful voices are needed in our world right now. Any thoughts on that, Todd?
I couldn't have said any better.
Love you. We're so grateful you guys joined us today. And those of you that are watching the recording, a lot of people watch this in recording. It's hard to kind of gather on Sunday mornings sometimes, but we're going to do a little closing meditation just by solidifying. We really find, we have these great conversations. We want to keep it going in this online space. But really, the crux of everything for Todd and I in our world, for my clients when they're working with me, for people that, just that soulful relationship, it comes from that place of meditative contemplation, that place of quiet, to just still for a moment so that you can hear your own voice instead of just hearing Todd and I. So anything else you want to add, Todd, before we move into that portion about truth, about anything about how this is in the world and playing out, or any other advice you have or insight you have or invitation you have for folks?
All the answers are within you. That's all.
That's a very good point. Very good point. Okay, so we're going to have you just do a little exercise to just close your eyes for a moment if you feel comfortable doing that. Just closing your eyes and taking some deep breaths. So just coming into this centered moment and just allowing for a minute of silence to just allow the little elements and touch points and words that you heard today to just rest and settle. And then allowing those that really moved you and stirred you to just percolate to the surface and just take a moment to just think and consider. And then to just ask yourself the question, what truth is stirring within me right now? Then imagine how sharing that truth from a place of center, from a place of intention and calm and love, what that might look like. And then finally, What's just one soulful thing I could do this week to honor that truth within me, to either share it with another or to just deepen it within myself? And when you're ready, come back to the room you're in, opening your eyes. And just feel the energy that we're sending you. We're deeply grateful you joined us today. Come back when you're ready. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that just these conversations are so important to have about these topics. And thank you for joining me today, Todd. It's just amazing to take what you and I talk about on the regular and kind of bring it to new light with new stories. And we hope that served you, everyone, and that it just made you think of your own truth, what's right for you, what's true for you, what's real for you, and how you can play that out in the week ahead until we see you next time. Next week, Todd and I are going to be co-hosting again together, eh, honey?
Yes.
And we're going to be
My goal
talking.
was to do the history of the Toronto Maple Leafs, but I think I got overridden on that. Maybe something soulful.
That's right. Yeah, we won't be talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs, so please come back. Although, if you wanted to talk about that, you could let us know. We could have a special. We could have a SoulFull Sessions special on the Toronto Maple Leafs, Todd Maki. But next week, we're going to be talking about values. So we're going to pull right up out of, we talked about truth today, and that's one beautiful, soulful, foundational value. But we're going to pull out next week, and we're going to talk about values in general and how they drive our lives, how we can solidify those values. Todd talking about his stories about where values have played out in his life to be able to, just kind of cultivate a life of vibrancy and what you imagine coming to be and manifesting in your life. And my perspective being from some of the work I've done in values action alignment with clients and corporations and just talking about what that looks like and what values mean for our world. So we'll be back talking about that on a grander scale next week. Thank you, Gail. Grateful for you and Dave too. Just so appreciate all of you showing up today, and we just hope it served you. And we're just holding you in our hearts, and we can't wait to have another conversation with you. Please do send us notes, messages, questions, topics that you would love us to cover. We want to be in your minds and in your hearts. And so, if you have something you think is of particular importance to talk about, let us know. Also, let us know about those that you think might be wonderful for us to interview and to have a roundtable with. So we'd love to hear that. If you want to nominate someone or nominate yourself, if you're sharing some soulful things in the world, you want to have a deeper conversation in an area of your specialty, we would love to hear from you. We're booking kind of right now into February, but please let us know and put the names forth and send us messages. We answer every single one. So we're very grateful. Thanks, Todd, for joining me. I'm glad I get the rest of the day with you, my friend. And and we love you all. And we will see you next Sunday. On Wednesday, we will have the newsletter out with the values theme being set for the week. And then we'll see you next Sunday. Mwah. Lots of love, everybody.
Thanks.
Happy
Bye.
day. Bye.
Bye.